Nezha is untouchable in this meta. With the introduction of the new melee arcanes and tenno, Nezha became a force to be reckoned with. By already having his warding halo ability, which gives him a 90% damage absorption in addition, we also have arcanes that give raw armor. Nezha can easily be untouchable, even at Steelpath content. Okay, so for today, we are going to feature two builds for our dear trap boy Nezha. Nezha is a great Warframe that you can get pretty early in the game. You can get him at your clan dojo alongside with Wukong, Banshee, and Zephyr. He is a versatile Warframe that can deal damage, crowd control, and support his allies with his 4 abilities: Firewalker, Blazing Chakram, Warding Halo, and Divine Spears. Firewalker lets Nezha blaze a trail of flames that scorch enemies and cleanse allies, while also boosting his movement speed. This skill procs heat status effect on enemies, and this will keep on adding heat status effect the longer the enemy is in the trailblazes. That is why Archon Vitality can be a great mod to use on Nezha. Blazing Chakram lets Nezha hurl a flaming ring that burns enemies and makes them vulnerable, which means they take more damage. But that is not the reason we will be using this ability. We will be using this ability because of the Reaping Chakram Augment mod. This mod makes it so that enemies who are hit by the Chakram have a higher chance to drop health orbs. This is important because this will be paired with Equilibrium for our survivability and energy replenishment. Warding Halo is a skill similar to Rhino's Iron Skin. However, unlike Iron Skin, Warding Halo only offers 90% damage reduction and the status effect immunity. Increasing Nezha's armor and power strength will be the key to increasing the health of our Warding Halo, which can be easily done by using some mods and arcanes like Arcane Reaper or Health Conversion. Finally, Nezha's 4th ability is the Divine Spear. Impale enemies on the ground. When you hit impaled enemies with Blazing Chakram, the Chakram will multiply by 2-1 every enemy it hits, which means we can get more health orbs using Reaping Chakram and make more enemies vulnerable. In today's video, we will showcase 2 builds. One, which will be using a magnificent feature from the game called Subsume. Basically, this lets us use other Warframe abilities and put those abilities into our chosen Warframe, enabling us to create strong synergistic builds. But first, let's talk about the first build, which is the standard build, where we won't use any subsumed abilities. Now, on to the build. For our Aura mod, we use Corrosive Projection just for the 18% minus armor, Cunning Drift and Stretch for the range, since we will be using our 4th ability to crowd control groups of enemies, Adaptation for that 90% damage, reduction to specific damage types. This stacks up well with our 3rd ability, since our 3rd ability already offers up to 90% damage reduction to all sources. Archon Vitality for health, and for that nice passive which makes our 1st ability to proc 2 heat status every tick instead of 1. Blind Rage and Molt augmented for the power strength, so we can maximize the damage of our abilities, as well as the multiplier of our 3rd ability. Reaping Chakram for the health orb drops. Pair this with Equilibrium and Primed Flow. Now we have a pretty self-sustaining health and energy management. Primed Continuity for the bonus duration, so our abilities will stay up much longer. Then Arcane Strike for bonus attack, just for extra damage. Blue Tau Forged Shards for the base armor increase. If you don't have this, you can just replace the Arcane Strike into Arcane Guardian. Now for the weapons. We will use Burston Prime Incarnon for our primary. This will only be for killing tanky enemies like the Acolytes. You can use any primary weapons you want, because my build will primarily use melee weapons because I want to utilize the new melee arcane. This will be the build for our Burston Prime. Galvanized mods for the direct upgrade of Split Chamber and Aptitude. Galvanized Scope for the critical chance, so that we can go up to orange crits when we hit headshots while aiming. Malignant Force and High Voltage to create corrosive, so we can armor strip enemies up to 90%, because we will also proc heat status effects, since the incarnon mode of the burston has built-in heat procs. Hunter Munition for the slash procs, and Viral Sense for the critical damage. For the Exilus mods, you can use whatever you want. For the Arcane, we will use Arcane Dexterity, since we will be using our melee most of the time. For the evolutions, just copy this. For our secondary, we will use the Epitaph. Thanks to the Whisper in the Walls update, we got access to new mods, specifically accelerated isotopes, which give us radiation status. This does not merge with singular elemental damage types, such as heat, as you can see in our Epitaph. We get heat, radiation, viral, and cold status procs, which will boost our melee damage by 320% by using Condition Overload. For our melee, we will use the praedos just for the evolution buffs. Otherwise, you can use any melee like the Cronin Prime, for example. The evolution isn't really important, because the only useful perk we want here is just the base incarnon buffs that gives us attack speed and range. For the other evolution, you can choose up to your liking, but I recommend getting the initial combo and attack speed just for convenience. Now onto the mods. For our stance, we use Gemini Cross. We use Condition Overload since we will use a primer, Berserker Fury for the attack speed, Primed Reach for massive range. Pair this up with the incarnon mode, range buff. We will be able to hit a large number of enemies. Blood Rush and Weeping Wounds for the status and critical chance. Sacrificial Steel for the flat critical chance increase. Then Organ Shatter for our critical damage. Since we will always be using Nezha's skills, I use Arcane Exposure, which grants us corrosive damage on our melee attacks. Mentor's Legacy, just so we can use tenno. For the second build, we will subsume Nourish into our fourth ability. This ability gives us extra energy multiplier, kinda similar to Arcane Energize, but what is great about this skill is the fact that it gives us viral damage similar to Toxic Lash. Now for the build, we just replaced our Exilus mod for Power Drift and replaced Stretch for Pyroclastic Flow. Then that's it. For the companion, we will use the Nautilus for its grouping ability. Here's the build for it. Or you can just use your operator with the Magus Anomaly to pull enemies towards you and use Magus Lockdown to tether them. For the Focus School, I use Zanuric just for the initial energy regen. And with that, we are now done with the build. Now just a little tutorial on how the build works after you load into a mission. Go into operator mode and use your Wellspring, then use your Nourish to get energy. Then use your first ability and third ability once you encountered some enemies. After that, use your second ability to weaken your enemy and to make sure they drop orbs. By this time, you will see in the top right corner that melee exposure is at 240%, which means we have 240% corrosive damage. Pair this up with viral heat from our abilities. We will be getting another 240% base damage because of Condition Overload. Use your primer for tankier enemies. Make sure to cast your second or fourth ability from time to time to make sure that melee exposure is always up. As usual, thank you for watching the video. Like and subscribe to support the channel, and good luck tenno.